Welcome to the first video of a series looking at the construction of my permanent model railway layout in the spare room at the new house. This is the room that's going to become the train room at the new house. Currently full of DIY stuff and a big box full of train stuff. Prior to starting, I've decorated the room, painted the ceiling and the walls and glossed the windowsill, because obviously once the boards are up and the trains are running, I don't want to spill paint on the train set or have to put dust sheets down over everything in order to decorate. So I've done all that prior to starting the boards. I've converted the door into a sliding door to limit the intrusion into the room, so it only comes into the room by about 7 centimetres. That wasn't too difficult a job. I bought a kit online for doing that. As a result of fitting the door, it would then cover the socket up in the room, so I've had to put some trunking in and a new socket out of the way. So that's all finished now. We can get on with the boards. Part of moving house was having a big clear out of the loft, and I found this book from my childhood, Model Railways by Cyril Fraser. Published in 1980 and cost me 95p, and flicking through it I found this image here and I thought that's exactly what I want for the spare room and around the room layout. And I was also looking online and found this image, which kind of highlights the benefit of an around the room layout as opposed to just a single board. Obviously it's got the advantage that there's more space and more track. The disadvantage is that it's fixed and can't be moved, but that's not a problem in this case. The software that I'm using for my railway design is called AnyRail, and you can download a free trial version from the internet which allows you to use 30 pieces of track and items. I'll explain later how I get around that. It's got track items included, which has Hornby standard track, Pico set track and streamline track. What I've got set up here is the room layout, which is 8 foot square, and then here the orange section is the area for the sliding door. The boards on the north section here, I've got a 2 foot wide board, same for the east, 2 foot wide, south about 1.5 foot, and in the west it's 40 centimetres. And the way I've designed this is that within the limitations of the 30 pieces, what happens is, let me just open the other one, which is the north section. You can see here I put the track pieces down, and what I do is glue down the pieces that form the boundary of the next section, those would be ones here, and then save it under a new name. In this case it's north, and then saved as east, and then delete all these pieces and use the glued pieces here as the basis for starting the next section, and that way I stay within the limits of my 30 pieces. And then when I've gone all the way around and done the whole track in 4 different sections, I can screen capture those and then merge them in PaintShop Pro to form a final image. Now the way that AnyRail works is that you can just load pieces of track and then it automatically will join on sections, and all the measurements and geometry are all entirely correct. It's very simple and easy to use. You can move the track around, you can rotate it, position items, you can also position platforms and make rectangles for buildings. And there's, as I said, there's Hornby standard track, and also there's track from Pico, streamline track, and their set track. Now the track I had originally, which came with the good set I bought, was Hornby track, and this is their geometry diagram, shows how it all links up and the sizes. And then I became aware of Pico set track, and this is their geometry, and it's identical to Hornby track, so the length of the pieces and the angles and the curves are all identical, it's interchangeable. But Pico track is generally cheaper and also made in England, which is good. But I found clearly I'm going to need to buy more track than what I've got already, but I don't want to replace the track. But I was inclined to go for Electro Frog points because they'll enable smoother running. But then an issue arose, and some of you may not be aware of this, and that is that all Hornby track is insulated frog, and all the Pico set track, which is the same geometry and dimensions as Hornby, is also insulated frog. If you want to go for Electro Frog points, you have to go for Pico. In the Pico range, you have to go for Streamline, and the dimensions are different. You can see here, this top one has got the Electro Frog point, Pico point E86, which is the curve point, and down here is the standard Hornby curve point, which is the same dimensions as the Pico set track one. And you can see the Electro Frog point, the amount of curve in that is actually less than the set track or Hornby one, and also where the point comes off, it doesn't turn as far. Similarly, for the standard turnouts, the shortest one is longer than the Hornby one, and also the angle of it comes out at is much narrower, as you can see. And one of the issues there is that where you've got a crossover between 2 points, it puts the tracks closer together. If you have a look online in the forums, various model railway forums, you'll find the dimensions, but that's something that I've had to contend with in carrying out my design. So after a few months, this is a finalized design. It's been very useful to think about this over a long period of time, because as time's gone on, the layout's changed quite a lot. For example, essentially there's an outer loop which will allow express trains to run continuously, and then an inner loop which will allow smaller local trains like DMUs and also goods trains to run, collecting wagons from various locations and making up trains. So I thought about how I was going to use the layout, but also then I started to think about the realism of it. So for example, over here is a station, but that station is between the inner loop and the outer loop, and therefore if there was a car park here, how would passengers get there by vehicle? So I then thought about what roads I'd need and where I'd need crossings. So for example, a road may come down here and then go off the layout, but it's got to cross more track, so I'd need a crossing here, and same station, a long station in here would require a crossing up here for a road. So as time's gone on, I've thought about those elements and built that into it, and I was wanting to be sure that I didn't just cover the whole thing in track, because there's more to the modelling than just that. So going over it in detail, in the north we have obviously the outer loop and the inner loop with a curved crossover here. The crossovers, one here and one down here, an express crossover, are in different directions. And that means that a train on either loop, travelling in either direction, can get onto the other loop. Up here there's a goods yard, so there's a goods depot here. There's gaps here at the moment, but that's all going to be joined up. I've got an uncoupling ramp which I'll put there to allow goods wagons to be left in this siding here, more sidings down here, and then to come later a turntable here with storage for engines here. The actual design of this area is probably going to change later on depending on what I want to do at the time. For the east section, this outer loop I'm going to hide in a tunnel, with a tunnel mouth maybe here and here, and then have the Metcalfe building fronts along here to hide that. I think having a tunnel where a train goes off and then comes back again hides the fact that it's actually on a long loop. A long station in here, and a short one in here, which allows trains to stop on either loop, and then other trains to come in here. This long side in here is going to be a programming track for the DCC. In the south we've got the tunnel loop rejoining, and as mentioned earlier, express crossover points, and then down here a modern vehicle railway yard, like a TMD type yard, with perhaps up here cleaning area, fueling station, and down here I'm thinking about Pico pits inside an engine shed with some lighting. That'll be good. And then finally in the west we've got here a small station, country type station, with the inner loop passing it and then a siding at the rear. This section here, because of the doorway which is in this orange area, the sliding door of the room, this will be a lifting section here, and I'll come on to that and explain how that's all going to work later on. We have an expression at work which is known as the 6 P's, which stands for prior preparation and planning prevents a poor performance, and I think it's been really useful to plan everything in great detail. Once I had the layout design finalized, what I've done is worked out what framework I need. I'm going to use 9mm plywood as the baseboard, and then essentially it's mostly 2x1 battening underneath. It's the kind of design that Brian Lambert talks about on his web page. So this is the track layout with all the track in place on the boards, and then what I've done is I've worked out where I'm going to put my framework underneath the plywood, using the 2x1 battens. The spacing is roughly a foot square to make sure there's plenty of support and no sag in the plywood. And it was really crucial to do this because I intend to use point motors, probably the seep point motors, underneath the layout. So what you don't want is you don't want battens across the layout where there's going to be a point motor underneath, because that will make it difficult. So for example here, this batten would normally make sense to have this come straight the way across, but right here there's a curved point and the motor sits at that end of the point here, so that will be in the way. So that batten instead is moved up here. And by designing the whole thing in advance like this, I know where the wood's going to go and what wood I need to buy, so I don't buy too much, and I can keep it simple by using similar sizes of wood. And as time's gone, even this design has changed. We're no longer using these 4x1 panels on the front. By drawing everything out carefully and thinking ahead, it makes things much easier. Down here you can see this is the lifting section I discussed earlier. It's going to be hinged against the wall here, and I'll be showing you that later on when that actually construction takes place.